Hey everybody, this is the Easy Podcast episode 5, and I'm Zach Abbots, and this is...
Hey Zach, this is Erik.
Hi Erik. What is going on? That was weird. I don't think we should ever start the podcast like that again.
Well, excited to be back.
Yeah, where have you been?
I was in LA this week,
Yeah.
all week at Vid Summit, which is a video marketing, live streaming, YouTube. And they kind of cover all the social platforms, but a lot of the main speakers and trainers were big YouTubers. So
Yeah, that's cool. What all did you getting it like a highlight? Give me a highlight of that.
Oh man, it was. I think my biggest takeaway was reevaluating what I'm doing on YouTube. My initial reasoning for being on YouTube was filmmaking practice. So
Yeah, getting reps in, right?
yeah, the more reps that I get in, the better I'm going to be at editing. The better I'm going to be. So everything that I'm producing, I'm learning something. And the conference, I just kind of made me rethink the actual content that I'm putting on, because a lot of it's vlog format, and there isn't a whole ton of value to the content that I'm bringing other than the reps for myself.
Sure.
So I realized, well, if other people are watching it, I mean, there are 1,600 subscribers on there. So I'm like, well, maybe I should put more effort and intentionality behind the content
That's
that I'm
cool.
putting out. Yeah. So look for the next year of growth in the quality of content. So it's
Yeah. So, I'm excited for you to lose 1,600 subscribers because you've changed your format. It's going to be great.
yeah, it's gonna be awesome. I'm gonna go down to 2. I got 2 now.
Yeah.
2 people really love that.
You got me and my other account.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't been doing a whole lot. We wrapped on our narrative series a week ago, and so I've been catching up on just some TV. And there was this show that I saw on Instagram, of all places, an ad for it, and it's called Mr. In Between. And it's on FX, and it's Australian. I think it was completely produced there, and then we just, like America does, we stole it and farmed it over here and put it on television. So it's 30-minute episodes, but they're like just full-on narrative structure. So it's like Breaking Bad, but in 30 minutes, which is really interesting to me because usually those are longer form episodes. Usually those are 45 to an hour long episodes in most series, but this is 30 minutes. So it's really interesting to tell those stories with, that kind of genre, I guess I'm thinking of, where they're limited to 30-minute episodes. But it's basically about this guy who is I guess you could say like he's a jack of all trades kind of hitman guy, who does some work for, some shady characters basically, but you're along with him and just kind of seeing like his normal life along with it. And it's actually really interesting. And it's not shot like super interesting or anything like that, but the character development and just the acting is pretty great. And I've really liked it.
Wow. Yeah, apparently the inspiration came from a cult film called The Magician.
Yeah, this mockumentary style movie that came out, I think in like 2008 or 2005 or something like that. I mean, it's a while ago for them to sit on the idea and then come out with this in 2018 in this short form narrative series. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to checking it out. It looks pretty cool.
So you went to Vid Summit, and then you come back, and you immediately want to jump into a video project.
Yeah, I texted you last night at like 10 o'clock. Hey, what are you doing tonight?
Yeah, hey, I'm like, I'm seeing my wife for the first time in 2 weeks. What are you doing? I had no time for this.
Yeah.
So I want you to talk about it, though. It's what is it?
So basically, Studio 368 is Casey Neistat's project in New York, and he teamed up with Moment, which makes mobile lenses, and
Stuff for your phone.
Yeah,
Right.
filmmaking gear for your phone, basically. And they're doing a Halloween film festival. And some of the parameters are that they're doing a contest, and it's the short films have to be less than 3 minutes.
That's really short.
Yeah, that's extremely short. And so, you submit, and you only have basically 3 days between then and now to submit it. So
Yeah.
I think the submission date's Wednesday, I believe. But I thought, hey, this is cool. Again, more reps, practice, filmmaking. Let's see what I can put together.
Sure.
And so I started thinking about kind of a storyline and what would that look like. And I start researching Poltergeist.
Okay. Yeah.
Why Poltergeist is primarily because I have an 11-year-old daughter that I can force into being an actress.
Sure.
I'm sure there's some kind of labor law, something or other that I'm violating there.
Oh, don't worry about it.
Yeah, and so I told her about it, and one of the prizes that like they picked the top 5 or whatever, and the winner will get, in addition to a bunch of other gear and all kinds of stuff, like you get flown out. They're actually doing a film festival around.
Oh, they're going to show them all.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So they're going to show, I think, the top 5 or 10 or whatever in New York. So they fly you to New York. So it's this whole thing, and then the winner, they're going to post all of these on. There'll be an online voting system or whatever, and the winner gets a bunch of even more gear and an iPhone, the new iPhone.
Oh, okay.
Which is how I bribed my daughter into
told her you were
doing
gonna
this.
give it to her?
I said, hey, if we do this, you get the iPhone.
Yeah.
She was like, I'm all in. What do I need to do? And
Is she easy to scare?
she's terrified.
Oh, perfect.
She's terrified. And one of the things that we do around the house all the time is like jump out from behind the wall at each other. So she's good to go.
Oh, man. That's really funny.
And so I described kind of what we were doing and in the storyline, and she's like, "Oh," okay. She's like, "Wow, this is going to take a long time." I go, "No, it's only going to be 3 minutes." So that's what I'm working on right now. We kind of got our story arc together. We got shot list put together, and we did shoot some B-roll. Oh, and the other aspect of it is this: it can only be shot on your phone.
Now, this is the one requirement that I saw, and this is actually really interesting to me because I almost always hate shooting video on my phone. Mm-hmm. So to try and actually get good quality and then also horror aspect, like a Halloween aspect of it, yeah, it'll be really interesting because, I mean, the phones are great when they're in the sunlight, but getting that kind of moody atmosphere, yeah, that'll be really interesting.
Oh, it's going to be super grainy, that's for sure.
Well, I mean, that might play into it, though.
It might,
That might actually be really good.
Yeah, film noir on your phone.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, man. When is that due? Wednesday?
Wednesday, so.
Oh, man. I don't know why you're doing this podcast. You got to go.
Nah, it's daylight outside,
Oh,
so
that's true.
I gotta wait till it gets dark.
Yeah. Well, we don't have a main featured presentation this week, but there is something that I wanted to talk about. I got to see First Man in the biggest screen in Arizona, and man, this movie. It's the best movie of this year for sure.
Wow. Really?
I doubt I'll see anything better than it.
Well, from what standpoint? Like from a cinematography standpoint,
From technical, from acting, from story structure, from editing, from
wow, the whole gamut. Wow.
Yeah, I honestly think that this is, at least in my, I haven't seen every single piece of film that's come out this year. I don't get my hands on
Stars
all the.
Born?
I haven't seen that, but I guarantee you this is better than it. As good as The Star is Born probably is, and from what I hear, it's great, and I haven't gotten to it yet, but there's no way that this movie isn't better than that. This movie, there's only been a couple of movies where I'm digging into my seat, or I'm just so engrossed in the movie that I'm not breathing, or I'm not blinking at all. And this was one of them. This one and Gravity. I was fortunate enough to see Gravity in full IMAX 3D when it came out in the theaters, and that was an experience also where you're in space with Sandra Bullock and George Clooney. And this movie is very similar. It wasn't in 3D, but I think that was actually a benefit to it. It didn't limit them in a lot of ways. The cinematography is one aspect of it, which is Linus Sandgren. I don't know how to say his last name. That seems to be a common theme here. I don't know why all DPs have weird last names, but
it sounds good though.
Yeah,
it sounds good.
Yeah, Linus. So Linus, I'm just going to call him Linus. Him, and then the director is Damien Chazelle, which Damien Chazelle is probably most famous for La La Land, and then before that he had Whiplash. So this dude is just like, he's batting 1,000 because he had Whiplash and then La La Land, both of which I believe both were nominated for Oscars.
Yep.
And Linus actually won Best Cinematography for La La Land when it came out. What was that, 2 years ago now?
Oh, yeah. Was it? Yeah, 2, maybe 3.
Yeah. But this movie was shot on a plethora of cameras and formats. So for one, it was shot on actual IMAX film for the 4:3 ratio for it. Universal, which was the studio that released it, ultimately didn't decide to do a full IMAX 4:3 cut of the film. So there is no actual release of that, 7-story tall IMAX camera angle or camera aspect ratio. But they shot it on these Anton Penelopes, which are a pretty commonly used film camera. They're smaller bodied. And then the Aircam LT and the Airflex 435. This thing has 16 millimeter, 35 millimeter, and 65 millimeter film, and it's all film.
Wow.
There's no digital. There might have been. I from the information that I've gathered, there's no digital in the movie, and it shows. Like there is grain, actual grain,
film grain,
and and a lot of it feels like they may have, really used some cameras from that era almost.
Yeah, from like 69 or
Yeah,
whatever.
right.
Yeah.
It's awesome. The color in it is great, and I cannot get over just the way that this movie looks and feels. It's just on another level than anything else that I've experienced this year. And it was definitely just the perfect movie to see after the piece of crap that we saw last week, which was Venom.
Okay, here's something interesting. And I from a technical filmmaking standpoint, I think that's fantastic that if they did actually go back and grab cameras from 1969 to get that same kind of quality.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure that they did, but it definitely felt like
just
it.
The idea of doing that, that's cool. Like you're totally making a nod and intentionally trying to do something in that space and have it look like it would actually look if it was done at that time.
Right.
It stumbled out of the box office with only $16 million.
It didn't make anything. No, it was in third or fourth place. I think Venom still beat it in its second week, which is insane to me. America doesn't have a great track record of going to the box office for good movies. I think that's a pretty common stereotype for Americans. If you go to Europe or anywhere else, and you talk about movies, most of them have no idea or understand why, like, Transformers makes $1 trillion over here.
Right.
And it doesn't, I don't want to say that more Europeans go to movies like this, but movies like this don't make money the same way that a Venom movie does or a Transformers movie does. And it's really unfortunate, actually, because I feel like there is a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and creativity and intentions that were just thought out so well and then executed to the highest quality that I've seen in years.
Yeah.
There's a scene. The first scene is Neil Armstrong, and he's flying. I can't remember the plane. It's an X-15 or something like that, and he's up in almost the edge of the atmosphere where you finally start to lose gravity a little bit, and the plane is just shaking and it's violent, and you feel like you were in that situation with him, and there's so much of it that just kind of reminded me of like 2001: A Space Odyssey in a lot of ways, where at the end of 2001, spoilers for a 50-year-old movie. In 2001, he when he goes to meet the space baby, he's going through the colorful wormhole and everything, and there's just the camera is just violently shaking and everything, and you can't really, you don't get a clear image of kind of what is happening. There's just kind of like blurred lines all over the screen, and there's a lot of that in this. But the sound design, I got to talk about the sound design, because if this movie doesn't win the Oscar for sound design, I'll be shocked. It's just incredible.
Wow.
It's just amazing, every little piece of it, and they go pretty accurate with like the space stuff. It's like when the camera is outside of the spaceship, or in the atmosphere or whatever, outside the atmosphere, it's dead silent, and there's rarely any music with it. There's musical cues at one point, but man, it was awesome to. It was just an engulfing experience. It really brought you in. Every single piece of this movie put you in the seat of these astronauts, and it was just incredible.
Wow. Yeah, because there would be no sound in space, considering you're in a vacuum, right?
Right. This movie uses, I think, probably what we've learned over years and years and years of seeing movies in space. It uses the suspension of disbelief in its own way, because I think if you watch a lot of movies, like Star Wars or just anything else like that, they usually still have sound effects in space. And this movie, because we've been so just hammered in with sound effects in space in a lot of sci-fi movies, it probably has more of an impact that there is no sound in space in this movie, because you're so used to hearing that.
Right. Well, like the explosion of the Empire ship in Last Jedi, right? When the sound totally drops out.
Yeah, and that was a really effective moment, and probably the only effective moment for me in that film.
Maybe that's part of the reason why, the points that you make about Transformers making so much money, or Venom making so much money, and then this one doesn't, and because there's a lot of CGI and there's a lot of eye candy and there's a lot of that type of thing that's not really. I mean, sometimes, obviously, it supports the story. It's supposed to support the story, but a lot of times it's just there for eye candy.
Right.
And what I stumbled on this when I edited a video. It was a video contest, basically, for Imagine Dragons' Believer.
Oh, right. I remember this.
And so it was a partnership with Adobe, and they gave you all the raw footage. And then New Blue Effects also were promoting this contest, and you got the full suite of New Blue plugins and everything. And so they're like, hey, here's the parameters, here's all the footage, go make something.
Right.
And I took the approach. In my submission, I took the approach of I'm going to have a story arc. So I'm trying to stitch all these clips into a story arc, and there's a story arc through it if you've seen the actual, official video. And then I saw some of and I didn't get paid. It was like a top 25, and I wasn't in it, and I wasn't too hurt about it, but I was just scratching my head because a lot of the ones that made the top 25, there was no story arc.
It's a lot of flashy.
It seemed like it was kind of haphazard. It seemed like it was an eye candy fest, is really what it was.
Yeah.
And I mean, there were some, like the top 5 were super creative in how they approached and the things that they used. But there were some in there that was like, this makes there's no rhyme or reason. This is purely eye candy. And I was like, well, and it was an illustration to me, because you're talking about Adobe, and I forget the set of judges that were picking these were industry professionals that work on music videos and film productions all the time. And I thought, wow, this is interesting that in this space, storytelling is the foundation of what we do.
Yeah.
But yet we've kind of gotten away from that, and the audiences are just what looks pretty?
Yeah, what's shiny? Yeah, right.
It's the shiny object. Yeah,
that's actually a really good point. I think a lot of music videos have, I don't want to say that every music video from 20 years ago or more, when they started doing music videos, was always story driven. I mean, it's definitely always been a little flashy, or just guys playing on a stage with bright lights and pyro going off, but the music videos that I remember that stick with me are always something that has some sort of a story element to it. I think Childish Gambino is a pretty strong voice in that. with his it's Summer.
This is America. Oh
this is America.
The animated
too,
one,
but the animated one.
Yeah, feels like summer.
Feels like summer. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the story in that is so great, and I don't understand all of it. I'm not necessarily that entire audience, but I think about that music video all the time.
Yeah,
and it's great, and I think it has to do not so much with just because it's a great looking visual animated music video, but the story of it is it's heavy and it's meaningful, and it goes this interesting juxtaposition with the lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
And This Is America is another one that he has where you're just like, gosh, and I think a lot of people maybe look at music videos as like an ad for the album or an ad for the song instead of like a companion piece to the song. Mm-hmm. And I've always been a fan of just the companion piece music videos, the ones that enhance the experience of the song.
Yeah, I mean, what you said in the beginning is that what are the ones that you remember? The ones that sit like we watch eye candy. We're inundated with eye candy. There's meaningless eye candy all around, everywhere, all the time, trying to push different ads and whatever else. But it's the stories. It's the ones that are meaningful that stick, and that's for me as a filmmaker. That's what I want. I want that story to stick in your head. I want you to talk about it. I want people to podcast about it or whatever. Yeah. I want it to either bring awareness to an issue or help make a difference in overcoming something. I don't know, or inspiring people to go do something.
Yeah.
And I know there's the entertainment value of unplugging and that type of thing. And I need to embrace that more, obviously, as a filmmaker.
Yeah, right.
But I know. I think for me personally, it's the things that have more meaning. Like you mentioned, This Is America. It's like you kind of mindlessly start watching it until, okay, spoiler if you haven't seen it. But if you haven't seen it by now, go watch it. Yeah. And he shoots the guy in the chair, and it's like the shock value is like, okay, now you have my attention.
Yeah. And then now I'm paying closer attention to every detail of this video.
And I went and rewatched it 4 times the same way that Trent Reznor did when he tweeted it out. He goes, I can't remember the last time I've rewatched a music video at that 4 times or 5 times in a row. So, yeah.
We're talking about story, and I know a good portion of the moon landing story. I know quite a bit about it. I'm a big fan of space. I like just anything that is space related. Every time a SpaceX launch goes off, I'm just like a little kid, in a candy store. And the story in First Man, I think, it's told so interestingly, and it jumps around through just years. I think it starts in 60. I'm gonna get this wrong, but I think it starts in like 62, maybe 61, and it starts with him taking this first crash basically that he has, and then he goes home, and then he's dealing with his daughter who has a brain tumor.
Oh wow!
And I didn't know this part of Neil Armstrong's story. I basically just know from when he started to become a famous astronaut and then onwards. And I'm 30, so I didn't grow up in the 60s with all of that going on. So I got a lot of it secondhand and thirdhand. And my dad's an aerospace engineer, and then his dad, he worked on airplanes and was a pilot himself, and so then my uncle's a pilot. So I have this history of just everything flight related, and so I got a lot of stuff from those guys, just about John Glenn and Buzz Aldrin, and just everybody. And but I didn't know this part of the story, and so what Damien Chazelle, I think, did masterfully is he grabs you with that action moment, and then you're like, oh, this is what it's going to be. You understand, like, you get the vibe, the violence of this airplane crash, and then you go into the emotional side of it immediately. And I was in.
Wow.
I mean, this is 15 minutes into the movie, maybe.
Wow.
And I'm like, yeah, let's go on this ride. And it was very little dialogue. There's not a whole lot of talking in these sections, and spoilers a little bit for First Man, but it's based on a true story. So Neil Armstrong's daughter, she passes away, and you kind of understand Neil's thought process and his lack of emotion for so much of the rest of his life.
Yeah,
because he loses his daughter, and she's like 6, maybe.
Wow.
Yeah, and the way that's done is it's just so interesting and beautiful, and the story is so strong in this movie that I was hooked right from the beginning, and then I just went on a ride through the whole thing. It was great.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I was still wearing diapers when they landed on the moon.
Yeah, you were 6 months old?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I probably watched the original when Armstrong landed on, but I don't remember
in your diapers?
it.
Yeah, right.
I'm sure it was on.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, it's the most watched thing ever, I think, at the time, and it might still hold that record. But I think this movie needs to be seen by as many people as possible, and it needs to be seen on the absolute biggest screen that you can see it on. I was fortunate enough, again, we talked a lot about it, but I was fortunate enough to see it on the Cine One. It was one of the only 2 showings that they had in that format. They're not doing it anymore. Hopefully they'll realize that there's a market for it. If enough people go and see it to take Venom out of the Cine One and put this in there. But the cinematography, if we can get into that for a little bit, Linus is just incredible. And I think a lot of it, a lot of the gorgeous imagery, or just the way that things are presented in the movie, I got to hand to the editor as well. The editor, I don't have his name in front of me here, but the editing in this, man, there wasn't any moment where I was like, this is dragging on too long, or this has a weird pacing feel to it or anything. I think it was just perfectly edited.
Wow.
I don't think there's anything I would take out. I don't know if there would be anything I would want to add. Maybe add some more for selfish reasons, because I didn't want the movie to end. I just wanted more. I wanted more of this movie. But it looks great. And the fact that they shot it on so many different formats that they did. And I want to say there's probably only maybe like 4 actual locations in the whole movie. They basically take place in this neighborhood, and then at Neil's house, and then one at the NASA headquarters or NASA launch site, or not launch site, but the radio site in Houston, and then at Kennedy in Florida, and then in space, obviously. Yep. But it was just, I don't know. I keep babbling on about this movie. It's a movie that as soon as we were done, I wanted to see it again. It's just sad to me that it's only done 16 million at the box office. It deserves so much more. And I don't know if that's a sign of like nobody cares about space anymore, which that to me is also,
except Elon Musk.
Well, yeah, but at the same time,
Branson.
Like, what are those guys? What those guys are doing is different.
Yeah.
Billionaires trying to make a difference, sure, but I don't know. There's something like, I wasn't super emotional when Neil's daughter passes away in the film, but like when that Saturn rocket got up there and it the modules start dislocating, and like I got teary-eyed because it's such a big moment in history.
Yeah,
these guys, and it's such a technological achievement that 400,000 people had to do to make it work.
It's fascinating. I mean, the thing that blows my mind, and I think we talked about this earlier, was how they have never broadcast something from space before.
Yeah.
Now, I
was actually thinking about this.
and it was like, wait a minute, you've never been on the moon before, and you're broadcasting that back.
That was actually a really interesting part of when I was watching this movie. I was like, it was for the first time I was like, wait, how did they know that this was even going to have a strong enough signal?
Right.
And then also I was thinking, man, that gear weighed a lot on its own. So then they had to factor in all that for fuel and stuff, that they needed all of this gear, this broadcast gear, I mean, and by today's standards, it's terrible footage, but at the same time, it's like they actually did that, and it's incredible to me that they were able to guess how that would work and get it right.
Yeah. So here, I have another question. Since you've seen it, I haven't seen it yet. One of the things that fascinates me, and we've kind of been desensitized to this in our day and age, is the overview effect. It's this perspective phenomenon that happens to astronauts that when they've gone up into space, that there's this effect that I can't explain it because I haven't experienced it. But when they see Earth from a perspective other than in an airplane or on the ground, which nobody has up until this point.
Yeah.
And you're seeing the blue of the atmosphere around the Earth,
the thin blue line.
And you're seeing Earth on the contrast of the blackness of space floating around by itself. And that phenomenon to me is fascinating because until those missions happened and those pictures came back, and you can go on Google right now and Google the Earth and see.
Yeah, we have 1,000 satellites up there that are taking pictures all the time.
And but even in the pictures, we still don't get that effect.
Right.
That's something that it only is reserved for the astronauts or cosmonauts. It's been in space. No pun intended.
It's not touched on a whole lot in the movie.
But do you get that sense?
That moment? Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because I had just watched I was on the plane and I over somebody's shoulder I saw them watching this documentary that had Chris Hadfield in it, who's another astronaut, a current astronaut. Actually, I think he's retired now, but and it was called One Strange Rock, and it's this National Geographic documentary that I think it was split up originally into a few sections, but now it's on Hulu in its entirety as like one video, and it's narrated and hosted by Will Smith. But anyways, so I was watching this a couple weeks ago and just sat through the whole thing, and it's shot beautifully, and they get into all the molecules and what it takes for this plant and this thing to live, and it's amazing how like the world works with itself to do these things, and they talk about the overview effect, right?
Yeah,
they talk about it, and it said each of them that experienced it, they immediately felt closer to Earth, but then also further away from it. But it gave them just this awe-inspiring experience of wanting to take care of and wanting to be more a part of Earth as a whole. And it is, in a way, it's probably unfortunate that not everybody can just go and do that.
Right.
Not everybody can see just how small we are here and experience just how thin that atmosphere is. I mean, it's crazy thin with what separates us just from floating out into space and then not being able to breathe. And this movie, The First Man, it touches on, it shows that experience briefly. He's up in space with another astronaut, and they're attempting to dock with another piece of space gear, and they show him looking at the blue line. And I saw this on an 80-foot screen, and that's probably what it looks like.
Wow.
It's just incredible. And I think maybe that's one of my reasons for loving space is, I'm going to get a little sappy here, but I love this planet, and I love seeing it, and I love seeing what it's capable of, even if some of that isn't great, but it's beautiful. And I think movies that convey that, and then they also convey the beauty of what man and humans and women and what we're all capable of, conveyed through cinema. Like I don't know. It's really connecting to me. It's a really strong, powerful moment. Like I said, I got teary-eyed when seeing the Saturn rocket go up into space, and and I know this story. Everybody knows this story. It's 50 years old now, and it's just amazing. I can't recommend seeing it enough. I keep saying that, and I know I'm a bit of a downer mood right now, but you got to check it out. You really do. I don't think it's a movie worth missing, for sure. See it in the theater. and the cinematography is great. The editing's great. The score is incredible. The coloring is great. I think it really helps you get into the mood of that era.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. I mean, the coloring is so strong in this, and it's done by this woman that I haven't heard of before, but she's actually done quite a bit. She did La La Land and Whiplash also. So she's worked with Damien for a while, but her name is Natasha Leonette. I think I'm saying that right. But just great. The movie looks great. The acting is great. The story structure is great. There's not a weak part.
Yeah.
Of this film. So I think everybody should see it. And remember, like, we have computers in the palm of our hands now, and they're sending a SpaceX rocket every other week up into space now, but it didn't used to be that way. It took a lot of people, and it took a lot of lives that were lost in this space exploration. And some people don't think it's worth it, but I think it has been. I think there's a lot to what we've learned from being in space, and this movie, I think, is just a love letter to that in a lot of ways.
Yeah, wow, that's a great way to just illustrate that. And I think you talk about exploration and honoring the lives that were lost in this exploration. I mean, that happened 500 years ago.
Yeah,
when people were coming to the West. They were coming to the West Indies.
Right.
Which was the Caribbean, and landing in Florida, and they didn't have, the technology at the time afforded them the opportunity to sail across the Atlantic. But prior to that, it was completely unexplored.
Yeah.
From that perspective, obviously there were indigenous people here that were had no idea there was people on the other side of the planet. So it's interesting how the planet over the last 500 years has gotten smaller.
Yeah, in a lot
because
of ways,
of that
yeah.
exploration.
Right. Yeah.
And in the same way, space. I don't know if space is going to get smaller because we start exploring it, but we'll have a better understanding. And even thinking about that, and we'll get a little existential thinking about, you look up at the stars and you can't help but think and be overwhelmed by the vastness of space itself.
Yeah.
And it's humbling because you realize how tiny you really are.
There's a really great illustration of that in there's a Robert Zemeckis film called Contact.
Yep.
With Jodie Foster. Yep. And it opens up with space basically, and then it starts flying through space and goes to the galaxies, and then you get to a certain point. I can't remember if it goes towards Earth or away from Earth, but either way, it gets going one way, and you can hear different radio broadcasts and how long it would take for those radio broadcasts that we've been sending out for so long. It shows some broadcasts from World War II and stuff like that, and just how far away that those have reached now, 70 years later, how long it took them to get that far. And but it just, it shows in such a great way just how small Earth is and how vast space is. Yeah. Which that's another movie that we should revisit.
Yeah.
It's great. I don't think it gets talked about enough, honestly, when you're talking about science fiction films. It's a strong one.
I need to go see this thing because it sounds awesome. And quite honestly, I'm in my mind from your description and from what I've read, it looks like it's probably going to be the Oscar run is going to be solid.
Yeah.
And it's probably going to rival Star is Born. I know that's got Star is Born's got a lot of buzz about, a lot of Oscar buzz right now, but
I don't like to compare everything or base everything on whether it's a good movie just off of the Oscar.
Yeah, it's not a good measurement.
But there are certain movies, and I'm not a huge fan of rich people, patting themselves on the back with a golden statue.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is some merit to doing it, in the sense of that person or that crew or that actor. Man, they deserve recognition
for sure
for what they've done.
Yeah.
It is, it's a lot of politics in a lot of ways, and a lot of other stuff that is pretty negative. But at the same time,
we're not going to get into that.
No, I don't want to get into it.
You're gonna. That's gonna be.
We won't talk about that ever, probably.
But that's not. Yeah. I agree with you. It's not a measurement. whether or not you win an Oscar, it has no relevance to how great the film was, as well as what the box office return was.
Yeah, I mean, more often than not, there are low box office returns for movies that win Best Picture, so that's not anywhere near. Yeah.
Yep. But I totally agree. Neither one of those are measurements of how great or bad a movie is.
Yeah.
However, unfortunately, movie making is a business. And so, the studios measure that and they use those feedback loops in a way to make more films. Right. And so if they're not making money off of films, they can't afford to pay the crews, and it becomes this cyclical thing that doesn't support itself. But
yeah, so if awards, prove how much things don't really matter in 99, Shakespeare in Love beats Saving Private Ryan, doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, they got that one wrong.
Yeah. So, but sometimes the award is deserved, and I think the recognition is a huge part of people going on and doing great work and continuing to do great work. So I think this movie should definitely be nominated, for cinematography and editing, and but for sure like sound design and sound editing.
Yeah.
Claire Foy is in it. She plays Neil's wife. She's great in it. And the direction of this is awesome. So I'll be really surprised if it's not nominated for the Big Five for sure.
It's definitely going to be.
It has to, and I'll be shocked if it's not. I mean, I know that would be basically like 3 Damien Chazelle movies in a row, but if the dude's good, the dude's good.
Right.
So,
yep.
But that's enough of us talking about First Man, or at least me talking about First Man. I'm blabbering on and on and on about it. Go check it out. See it before it leaves theaters. If you don't see it before it leaves theaters, go and immediately just see it on iTunes.
And see it on the biggest screen you possibly can.
Yeah. See it in IMAX. See it in a real IMAX. Don't go to the fake one. That's just basically an AMC theater with an IMAX logo.
Boom, boom.
Yeah.
That was the bus.
Yeah. So go see it in a real IMAX, the giant ones. It's worth the extra money. It is definitely worth the experience of going to the biggest screen you can see it in with the biggest sound system you can see it in.
And by no means was this podcast sponsored in any way by the First Man movie, or the studio.
Oh, no. Yeah. Well, it's Universal. I do want to talk about that for a second because we've talked about 20th Century Fox and now that they're being bought by Disney. And this is another company, though, that it is owned by Comcast, which I have had the fortunate experience of not ever having to deal with Comcast as an internet provider or a cable provider. Not very many people can say that. So I don't have any experience there. I've just seen online how people just hate Comcast as a company, and they're voted #1 worst company ever for like 5 years in a row.
Wow.
So I can see a lot of that, but I think Universal is probably one of the last chains or distribution studios that's releasing things that are like this. And I don't want to sound like a broken record talking about tentpole movies. We love tentpole movies. We love Marvel movies.
Yep.
But it's these more intimate movies that I think I fell in love with movies. It's definitely these type of movies that made me want to become a certain type of filmmaker and do things a certain way. And if we lose track of those, if we stop releasing those, or if they're only going to be released on Netflix or Hulu, I think that's a shame, because this movie is a movie that deserves to be seen in a theater, deserves to have to deal with that theater experience. Which might be a noisy neighbor or some kid unfortunately running through, but some movies deserve it. Some movies are worthy of the giant screen with the big sound system, and this is one of them. And I hope that Universal doesn't get jaded from this movie not making a whole lot of money, and then they stop greenlighting movies like this. 20th Century Fox has done some really great movies similar to this kind of artistic, creative filmmaker movies, and
I think that needs to be a separate podcast all in of itself, as far as independent versus the big studio versus the art of the craft.
Yeah, and
because
this isn't a movie that I would want to be an independent film, though.
Right.
I don't know the budget for this. I should have looked it up, but it felt expensive without feeling expensive. And what I mean by that is that all the space stuff and all of the Saturn, rocket and everything like that, it looked photorealistic. I mean, the launch of everything, I'm pretty sure they may have used some actual footage because IMAX has done tons of space movies, but it felt real. All the rocket stuff felt real. The space stuff felt real. So the money was spent furthering the story, and you can tell, and it does not look like a cheap movie at all. So
right.
I don't want to advocate that something like this needed to be an independent film, but not everything needs to be Infinity War or
right.
Well,
and I think that's another point for that too. The independent level usually is lower budget. I think in addition to that, the independent thing could be because you want to have more control of the art.
Yeah, the auteur style filmmaking, which is a totally different thing. And I think you're seeing a lot of great movies come out of that that go through Sundance or Toronto or Cannes or anything like that. Cannes is Cannes now. It's a little more political than it's kind of the Oscars of film festivals. But I do think a lot of great films that are independent films come from those festivals, and then they're bought up by larger distributors like Universal or 20th Century Fox or even Amazon now. Amazon's released a lot of great movies. So The Big Sick is one of those that you should check out.
The Big Sick was great.
Yeah, Big Sick's awesome. So, the thing that I like about Amazon over maybe Netflix and Hulu is that Amazon isn't afraid to say, that's on our digital platform, but we're also going to put it in theaters. So, I just think it would be a shame if we lost the theater experience to just the big tent poles. I don't want to only go to the theater to see the next Marvel movie. I want to go to the theater to see the next A Star Is Born, or the next First Man, or the next, even like a John Wick movie. Those could eventually only be on streaming platforms, that style. So I want to see those smaller movies still in the theaters. I think emotion scaled up to 50-foot screens is powerful. Yeah. And I want to see that. So just don't stop releasing these intimate movies on the big screen. That's enough of me preaching. There's something I want to plug real quick, which is an Instagram account that I came across. I'm probably a little late to the party here, but it's called Cinematogger. I'm going to spell that out. So it's on Facebook and Instagram, and it's at Cinema, TOGR. This account is it's really great. There's not a lot of memes or anything like that, but it's
this one there.
Yeah, cinematography stuff. It's almost all geared towards that. And
so, cinematographer, if you're listening, say hello to your newest follower. Boom.
Yeah, I mean they have 327,000 followers already, so we're a little late to the game here. But there's some really great behind the scenes photos and videos that they're posting on here, and even just some really cool product highlights that you can check out. So go and follow them. They're awesome. I don't know if they're affiliated with anything else,
and this podcast was in no way sponsored by Cinematogger.
We're not sponsored by anything, but if you would like to sponsor our podcast, you can reach us at theeasypodcastshow@gmail.com. We are looking for options.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Eric, that about does it for this week. You got anything you want to plug?
No, I want to plug the Easy Podcast. So you can follow us on Twitter or Instagram at The Easy Podcast. You can also follow us on YouTube at The Easy Podcast Show.
Hit that subscribe button if you're listening to us for the first time. We promise it's not always this dreary of a conversation about good films, but we try and have a podcast episode every week. And sometimes we're busy because we are in the industry, so we're actually filming or working on projects, so we might miss a week here and there. But every week we'll have a new episode, and you can check me out personally on Instagram at Zach Abbots. It's in the show notes, or you can check Erik out at
Erik Thurston.
There it is. All right, guys, we'll see you next time, and thanks for listening.
All right, rock on.
You want to try that again?
Maybe. I guess I do.
What else you got?
Peace.
How about another one?
All right, have a great week. You're going to leave this whole... You were laughing about leaving this whole thing in, weren't you?
Yeah, I'm leaving this all in there.
All right. Deuces. How about that? still having a hard time wrapping this up.
You are. I'm fine.
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
You want me to leave this in?
Yeah, go ahead.
You want to say bye?
Bye.
Bye.